the framework of our work here, one of the challenges for pathology in general is to figure out how to just work together. Pathology itself is extremely fractionated into little domains we all feel comfortable with. But how to get to this kumbaya remains a major challenge. And I firmly believe, based on the comments that you just heard, that tissue banking as a science and as an operation is going to be critical to this endeavor. So I'm going to admit, coming right out of the gate, that at the University of Pittsburgh, we're laggards in this space. We've got some very nice infrastructure that maybe some other places would like to have, but a complete pipeline and a team that's dedicated to do personalized medicine doesn't exist. So I'm going to talk to you about our scar tissue so far at the University of Pittsburgh and trying to make this happen. We're going to start implementing personalized cancer medicine, which a lot of places are doing. But I will tell you, I feel like a rookie and lose sleep over how each day passes, and I don't see the progress we need even at our center. So I don't want to portray us as experts at Pittsburgh. So I have a lot of conflict of interest. I won't go over any of this, but I do want to note something. For the first time in almost 15 years, I don't have any corporate-sponsored research going, and in this era, it's unbelievable. We're in a tough area economically, both for our colleagues in the LIS space as well as for making the use cases for genomic medicine come to life in real business models that pathology is a partner in. And so this is the biggest embarrassment to me in my presentation to you, that I have absolutely no conflict of interest in corporate-sponsored research, and hopefully I will fix that. And that's the first time in 15 years for me. So I want to give credit, because a lot of the work here is not my own. We have a personalized medicine task force at the University of Pittsburgh Cancer Institute. I'm an associate director at the Cancer Institute for Cancer Informatics. Adrian Lee is our scientific lead doing the genomics of breast cancer. We have cleaved our program for years. I led the pathology and oncology informatics efforts, both the operations and the research. And when I became academic chair of a department of biomedical informatics, the health system developed antibodies to an academic running clinical systems. So I hired a CIO, which is Scott Stevens, who's doing a very credible job. And one of my senior programs is one of his senior technical architects, Mike Davis, who developed our clinical trial system and is now working on developing our personalized medicine information management system. And then we had an NGS task force. Rama Gulapalli, a fellow in molecular diagnostics, worked with Jeff Kant, who sadly passed away on September 29th. This is a great loss to us at the University of Pittsburgh. Jeff and Rama and I have a paper that's in press that will be coming out in JPI. And unfortunately, Jeff will be a co-author posthumously, but had started our path for thinking about this, and this is a huge setback for us. Our efforts really kicked off with a cancer symposium, which Mark participated in. We brought in leaders from around the field, including Victor Valculescu from Hopkins and Richard Wilson from WashU. And we had a think tank about what can we learn from some of the larger centers that are kind of ahead of us to help inform what we need to get an effort going at the University of Pittsburgh. And so a lot of today's discussion is essentially executing on the plan we developed with these thought leaders, and I really appreciate the partnership from folks like Mark, Victor, Richard, others in the field in helping us move this process along. I really do believe, I've said a lot of things along the way in the 17 years of this meeting that I thought were very important things for pathology. I've never said that anything was the most important thing for pathology, and I'll put a stake in it. This is the big one. This is the one we all as a profession have to pay attention to because it will fundamentally further increase the relevance of pathology and really get us connected to patient care in a way that we haven't been in the past. So my heroes like Mike LaPosada for a number of years, and the good things that are going on at Vanderbilt University, which eats our lunch in biomedical informatics, and now with Mike there's probably going to eat our lunch in the implementation of genome sequencing to practice, are the people to pay attention to. So I always have been a big proponent of education and creating a stable pipeline of people that can help through education. I really think that if we can all get together and commit to training people in computational pathology, we'll have the people that Karen and Mark and other programs need to do the pathology informatics side, but also represent the computational side that's needed. And why my foray to being a chair in biomedical informatics has been important is I have 40 PhDs, of which 20 are doing bioinformatics, and I do believe they have a place in the laboratory in helping us with these systems as well. And now a full third of my faculty are focused on bioinformatics, translational bioinformatics as their scientific contributions. Could have never done that in the pathology department, and that's a little bit sad. So how will pathology informatics and the LIS affect personalized care? There are key areas of evolution and revolution needed within the LIS. You know, how are we going to be able to warehouse the kind of data that's coming? Our systems simply cannot do it. I think it's also important that we have to become professional warehouses of both data, tissue, and historical memory on the phenotype of the patients. And you know, we've never been very good at extracting phenotype from patients and coupling it. So becoming professional warehousing agents is going to be important to our future. In the role of the LIS and real decision support just isn't there today. We've handed that off to our electronic health record partners. And you know, this is a very complex and demanding part of medicine that pathologists have really largely forfeited to the folks running the electronic health record systems. I really do think that the next legacy system in medicine is the electronic health record. Although you hear all of this big, you know, hoopla about systems, you know, walking down the path to implement the mega one-stop shop, you've heard over and over from thought leaders in the field today that that is not a strategy that's going to help us in pathology, and it's also not a strategy that's going to help, and it's proven to not have helped patients in terms of decision support. So how we actually get to actionable care and how we actually make an informative pathology report remain our challenge. It will not be solved by electronic health record systems unless there's a revolution there, and I just don't see it coming. So molecular pathology and the role of sequencing Mark's covered, so I won't talk about that, but obviously that's the big driver. So we have two worlds. We have the world of pathology informatics, and we have the worlds of bioinformatics and computational and systems biology. And pathology informatics has to manage the LIS effectively for us. It has to provide a solution that integrates with the LIS for tissue banking and archiving. That's workflow that we should be able to nail down. I'm really proud of what John Gilbertson is doing with Sunquest Corporation, MGH, to bake tissue banking management directly into the LIS. I hope that that program is successful, and I hope it provides a template for solutions for the rest of the country that is very sorely needed. We really still suck at providing informatics support for molecular diagnostics. None of the LIS solutions today give anything for a robust environment for what's actually being done in molecular diagnostics laboratories today. And you know, this roadmap from PCR-based and gel-based analyses to sequence-based analysis is does anybody really have an effective tool that has a vendor partner in that space? I mean, we heard from WashU about their genomicist workstation. Vanderbilt's got their own custom developed solution for this. Who's beating a path with a development partner so that the rest of us don't have to do custom development? Well, I'd hold it to you, if you do not have a shop of programmers and people that can provide that to you, you're going to get hogtied in implementing any strategies without actually programmers working directly to provide you know, open source solutions, of which there are multifold. Most of the big genome centers are using open source solutions. And we also need to work with commercial partners. We're embarking on both paths at the University of Pittsburgh, working with commercial partners to enable them, because we've had a long history of that, but also working to develop our own custom solutions. So this realm for interactive data between analytics of bioinformatics, systems biology of computation and systems biology, and the operational health IT that the LIS is embedded is the real realm of computational pathology. And I'd hold it to you that this is where our future hangs. So, you know, I like showing this slide because, quite frankly, and this is from Jared Schwartz when he was the president of the College of American Pathologists, you know, we need to be able to get out of population-based treatment. So today, every patient that has a diagnosis gets lumped into population therapeutics, and based on the miserable 20% response for the average, you know, best therapy for a tumor, all the patients are lumped into that center category. And some, the drug is toxic and beneficial, which is okay, but we'd prefer to have a drug that is not toxic and beneficial in the white category. That's where we all want to get. But, you know, it's a shame that over 4 out of every 5 cancer patients get treated with drugs that hurt them and have no effect, and worse, you know, actually may lead to mortalities to shorten their life instead of extending their life. And Mark's illustrations clearly show that there is a course that we need to put patients on. And the reason personalized medicine can be efficient down the road, once we get rid of the big R&D that's needed to implement this, is we can get to the right patient to the right therapy earlier in their course and extend their lives. So what is personalized medicine going to require? And why the hell did Becich leave pathology to go to biomedical informatics? I really believe, personally, I saw that without a large force of people at the University of Pittsburgh that really understood the science and can fuel the R&D, and a large training force, like 40 trainees like we have in our program, we were not going to be able to get through the bottleneck of what pathology's needs would be. The needs for biomedical informatics, and you can call this pathology informatics or computational pathology, are database design and query, NLP. We heard from Justin Sterin, who's part of the eMERGE network, about the importance of natural language processing. We have 2 faculty that do this in an expert way. They've actually already created tools to suck the data out of our unstructured laboratory information systems and turn it into a database through a program called TIES. Rebecca Crowley has led this effort. She's also leading our personalized medicine effort to essentially take in records of all types, H&Ps, consults, pathology reports, anything that has rich text in it, and convert it into computer readable discrete text. You know, the implementation of vocabularies and ontologies in systems we use to manage this is still lagging. None of our LIS systems even embed directly LOINC codes or speak SNOMED translatable forms of computable knowledge. That usually happens outside of systems. De-identification is going to be critical. This is a conflict of interest I have to disclose because we developed the system that a commercial entity called the ID Data Corp has exclusive license to. It's used in over 100 centers around the country now, and our department does receive royalties back from the licensing agreement we have with the ID. I don't receive anything personally, but my department does, so I want to make sure I disclose that. And we need to implement decision support. I'm lucky at the University of Pittsburgh to have a guy who's one of the top, probably the top person now, or number 2 in the world in decision support through Bayesian algorithms. How do you actually make computable logic that allows computers to make decisions about structured data once you've got it, you know, ontologically aligned, you've got it in a data form that's machine readable, and then to make decisions about it. We have about 4 R01s that are really focused on decision support for genomic medicine. And then finally, you know, at the end of the day, there's also a science around how you design the systems to make all of this work. And that's called human-computer interactions, or computer ergonomic studies. Usability to make sure systems you develop actually are easily used by the users. So for all of this is going to be required to create the thing that will make the electronic medical record a legacy system, and that's the concept of an analytical data warehouse. So how many of you have an analytical data warehouse in place at your system today? Raise your hand. Okay, so it's about maybe 5% of the audience. So an analytic data warehouse takes data from multiple source clinical systems, structures it, and allows analytical algorithms to act on it. So UPMC is embarking, finally, even though we've had our MARS system, we have two MARs, we have both Cerner and Epic at our place. We have a DB Motion implementation that was supposed to solve the interoperability problems between Cerner and Epic. And now we have Varian for our oncology EMR. We're so lucky we have 5 EMRs at the University of Pittsburgh. Tells you that they're fast on track to be legacy systems to fit niche domains. And I'll hold it to you, the most useful work that they do is essentially the old HIS systems on steroids. Admission, discharge, transfer, tracking of meds, billing, and scheduling. And the rest just doesn't work that well. So, to make things actionable in healthcare, you're going to need this larger data warehouse. So we just announced a $100 million deal with Oracle and IBM and Informatica at the University of Pittsburgh to put together a pipeline that will essentially extract, transform, and load data into the warehouse. That's Informatica. Manage clinical data with decision support tools layered over a data warehouse. The data warehouse will be Oracle's engine, and the decision support tools for business logic will be IBM's. And if you thought it was getting hard to get Cerner and Epic to work together, we're going to see how it is to get IBM, Informatica, and Oracle to work together. However, I have to tell you, the University of Pittsburgh has its own health plan. It has its own insurance product, so we're a for-profit in the framework of having a health plan that manages the lives as a provider. As a insurance for covered lives in the region. And they've used this solution very effectively. One of the reasons the University of Pittsburgh is so successful is that stack has been used by our health plan for a number of years. It's pretty funny, our health system didn't know that that's what our health plan was using. We recommended Oracle be in the mix because of their stronger ability to handle genomic data. And then as I was initially called a rebel, we then discovered that the health plan that's kind of been to themselves because of the segregation between our not-for-profit and for-profit ITs, they found out that this is what the health plan had been using. So it was easy to sell this rogue idea of putting Oracle and IBM together. So I think we have the right mixture of things going on. So this is a complex diagram showing in concept how we expect our biobank, our legacy systems, our oncology EMR, our LIS to essentially harmonize data into a clinical data center, to have an omics data bank for the genomic data, and to do integration analysis, and more importantly, to figure out how to structure governance and data ownership and data stewardship over all of these systems. And we have, again, a very large part of our $150 million personalized medicine effort. $100 million of it is going to be dedicated to creating this enterprise data warehouse and having a persistent store of genomic data to allow for clinical decision making. And we will be partnering with vendors, and I will share my scar tissue with you early and often as we embark down this path. Activities that are currently underway for our enterprise analytic data warehouse is harmonization of data elements, extraction of standardized clinical data into a common data warehouse, figuring out provenance, what is the ground truth of data. Sometimes data exists in 4 different forms on the same bit of data on patients and their data across the system, so knowing how what trumps what as the ground truth source is not a task for the faint of heart. We want to extract standardized omics data. We've also lagged in implementation of next generation sequencing at Pitt. So one of the things we're going to do is we have very strong tissue banking and have been a contributor of about 1,500 specimens to TCGA, the Cancer Genome Atlas project. That data has already been done. We're going to reload, we're going to load initially all of the TCGA data into this data model, segregated as, because it's research data, it's not clinical data, and as we evolve our clinical practice, reboot and go to then clinical CLIA certified data. But we already have hundreds of samples on patients from our institution, and are going to use that data as a lever to get the pump primed for us at Pittsburgh. We also believe comparative effectiveness analysis is going to be key, as well as ongoing outcomes analysis to prove this. Since we have our own insurance plan, we got to prove that by delivering this care, it works for our own health plan. And it might be a little bit easier to convince the payer that the provider is doing a good job if we're working together. So we have a kind of a unique set of circumstances that I think will be interesting to watch. You know, one of the things that bothers me is that there are already 100 drugs in oncology, or 30, early inventory of 30 drugs that have approved, FDA-approved genetic testing, and over 100 drugs over all of medicine that have approved by the FDA genomic testing capability. But we as pathologists and we as health systems have not convinced the payers to allow us to implement personalized medicine strategies over the FDA-approved genomic and drug combinations. So I'm a pretty practical person. This is my hit list. Why go anywhere else? Don't look for the discovery stuff. Don't go through the off-label. Go to implementing the approved stuff. So with Northwestern and Justin Sterin and with Geisinger, one of the most innovative healthcare systems in the country, and Vanderbilt, who in my opinion is the leading healthcare system for implementing this, although I was very encouraged by the news Rakesh Najarayan talked about of what's going on at WashU, one of the genome centers. We are going to take and actually implement a service-oriented architecture to put in decision support systems with, believe it or not, letters of support from both Epic and Cerner to partner with us in this, to implement, to practice the management of the stroke and cardiac risk drugs, clopidogrel, warfarin, and the statins, in a pilot led by the excellent work at Vanderbilt University. Unfortunately, I'm not leading that effort. I'm a slave, but I'm fortunate to be a partner of that. But this kind of stuff, both on the research side and the clinical side, are going to kind of cast the path forward. And also managing this data about what's FDA and what's off-label and curating it from other institutions as they implement personalized medicine into some kind of public repository for the community to share will be the work of an informaticist and a librarian at the University of Pittsburgh. Curating these drug gene candidates in a usable way. There are resources that do this now, Farm GKB. And now you've heard of Fiend KB, which is an outgrowth of the eMERGE project, but something that's more tunable to the pathologist and the patient doesn't exist out there. So we do think reusing these public databases will be very important. So I'm not going to talk about next generation sequencing. We all know how complex it is going to be to analyze the cancer genomes. You know, the analysis of cancer genomes in every patient that walks the door is the dream. We're so far away from that right now. The leading centers have experience in the range of a couple hundred patients. WashU's done 250 according to Kresh's presentation at the meeting here. We're going to try to learn from them. Vanderbilt has really not focused exclusively on one cancer, and has collected biospecimens and DNA from over 200,000 patients. Every patient at their system now gets genetic consent for blood collection. They're not doing that for tumor collections, but they do have a breast program and this program for cardiac drugs. So there are leading places we all should learn from. So in the framework of this genotype and phenotype correlation, you know, tumor diagnostics, which are complex now, only going to get more complex, does herald to what Karen and Mark both agreed to, that all pathologists will be molecular diagnosticians of sort, or have to be knowledgeable how to implement this to their own practice. I think hematopathology has been there already. I think that several areas, breast, lung, brain tumors, have a considerable march of approved testing in most systems that are in the molecular frame, and you need to pay attention to this. And more importantly, folks in pathology informatics need to make sure this is a focused development effort to make sure the LIS, at least through, you know, rubber bands and tape with the existing LISs, support these areas and record this data. And more importantly, feed it to outcomes researchers so that we can prove our effectiveness in medicine. This again is a chart from Jared Schwartz, which I think is a lovely chart. We are still in the healthcare today frame where digital imaging is just coming to life, and are in the transitional phase where genomic medicine is still really early R&D at most places. How we get out into personalized healthcare is really going to require pathologists working with biomedical informatics, retooling their training program, and creating a pipeline of people with these skills into the discipline. And I accentuate that the people we're still attracting to pathology are not exactly the right people. And this is where Pathology Informatics and the Association for Molecular Pathology and other more, shall we say, visionary parts of the discipline need to get together to attract the right people into the discipline, because I don't see enough warm bodies as pathologists to do that. And we need to think about how we partner through the fact that our clinical laboratories can have PhD scientists and engineers affiliated with our practice. Where are we in the framework of thinking about training those folks and attracting them to the discipline? So there's still a lot of barriers to NGS. We haven't proven that NGS is going to be superior to current molecular diagnostic tools. A lot of anecdotes, but not a lot of focused studies showing that the cost will actually essentially get us there. Everybody kind of has this gestalt of, you order 4 tests and they're $1,000 each, and you could do the whole genome. It should be better, but how do you implement that? What about the storage? Who's the steward? What data gets shared? There's a whole bunch of issues that need to be sorted out. And the big bottleneck for NGS is the lack of qualified pipelines to do error-free, or at least 1 sigma, and maybe 2 sigma, and then 3 sigma, eventually to 6 sigma, frameworks. I have my test for a bioinformatics tool, and not a single one has passed, is if you take even targeted exome sequencing data and run it through the same software, that you come out with the same answer 3 times in a row. Doesn't happen for any of the existing tools out there. There's supposed to be nothing different when you run it through the tools. There are serious issues with the quality of the data on the pre-analytic part of this when you do sequence alignment to the actual analysis that have to be sorted out. And having clinically certified laboratories. How many people have a clinically certified laboratory to do genomic sequencing? So Penn, Michigan, University of Washington, NCI, Emory. So that's not a lot of places. WashU, Vanderbilt have certified labs. Mark, you guys don't have one yet?
We outsource everything.
You outsource everything, okay. All right. So in the framework of all of that, how we actually put it to practice, train our pathologists, and do the storage, the network connectivity, and all of that are all challenges. So being on the research side of the equation, I'm always scanning for research opportunities, and there are increasing numbers of implementing this type of work to practice as a grant. The reason we need this, why do we really need this? There's just too much data for docs to handle without computers anymore. So if you look at the number of data points, this is from Bill Stead at Vanderbilt, looking at decisions by the usual practice of medicine, we've well outstripped with the number of data points we can now produce on any single disease, the 5 or maybe 10 data points that docs could potentially handle without the aid of a computer, and it's only going to get worse. And what do you do about data that you learn if you do a large ship of data on other markers that may be relevant to other diseases down the road? How do you recycle that back to care after the initial test that the pathologist got ordered was for XYZ mutation? So being more interactive in care delivery with our patients is going to be an important part of our future. So, I show this figure. This is in this paper that'll be in JPI shortly that Jeff Kant and Rama and I put together. The amount of actual pieces of software that have to fit together to do primary and secondary and tertiary analysis and annotation on genome sequencing is daunting. So it's very impressive that WashU has a genomic pipeline that they're using for clinical care that meets the requirements of delivering it for care. We're far from that yet. So we're going to, again, take this approach of build our own and work with other partners out there commercially with their clinical workstations to essentially make sure that whatever we discover with our own practices can generalize to tools that others may use from commercial partners. So what's my recommendation? I think we need to realize that this is no longer just pathologists in their laboratory. The model that Mike Posada talked about of these diagnostic management teams is a key part of the success. We have 3 rainmakers in personalized medicine at the University of Pittsburgh, and one of the rainmakers is really talking about this, kind of like molecular grand rounds with the clinicians, where the pathologists are there, the cancer geneticists are there, the biostatisticians are there, the oncologists are there, and the caregivers are there, and this multidisciplinary team of people will be needed both to implement this, but then pathologists are going to have to get out of their laboratory and play an active role like they do in tumor boards with helping clinicians interpret and dialogue about this data. Because it won't be easy to encapsulate everything you can deliver in a report, particularly if you're slave to an electronic health record where your data is disintegrated into multiple little cells in a large spreadsheet, reported by time and analyte. And there are no synthetic reports for pathology unless you send them a PDF. And what clinician is going to open up a PDF in a cell and read it on a screen? It's just not going to happen. So Paul Chang, who at the meeting encapsulated nicely some of the workflow issues, we also need those cues when we actually do the diagnostics. And the idea of a cockpit is something we're actively developing with one of our commercial partners in Pittsburgh to help pathologists have better tools for displaying their own data and interpreting. Integrating pilot programs, that's where we're at Pittsburgh. We have a breast cancer pilot for personalized medicine. It just kicked off in September. We'll run 2 years. I'll actively report to you on our progress. I'm hoping to take us from laggards to leaders within a 2-year period. So, I have to say I'm very impressed with what's going on at WashU. These 2 presentations by Eric Dunkevich, which won an award for Cluster FastQ, and Rakesh Najarayan, who won also an award for the Clinical Genomics Workstation, our work to pay attention to. They've done about 250 tumors. They have a reporting workflow established. They're not using a commercial solution, and this is a real opportunity. I know the folks at WashU. It's where Mark and I, Mike Posada, all originate from. They're a great place for sharing their information. I'd dial them up and go see what's going on and pay attention to their work. Good group of people. Also, I think this model of the diagnostic management team is really important. Both by the way, the talks are already up if you missed these talks on the website. So you can get the streaming video if it was done in this room with a talking head, and you can get audio linked PowerPoint slides on all the presentations. And I'm not going to apologize that many of us missed presentations by going to one and 2 other things going on. But in response to what we've heard for the last 2 years, this is too much content. We need to get to everything. It's now already posted and no lag time. So you can get to the Mike's talk and Rakesh and Eric's PowerPoints. So at Vanderbilt, they've implemented cardiac drugs and phenotyping. As I've talked about, we're going to be a grant partner in an R&T implementation grant. We actually got letters of support from Cerner and Epic to both put hooks into their system with the SOA. They want to learn from us, which is a bright sign. I never thought I would ever get a letter from Epic. I've gotten this kind of collaborative letters from Cerner before, so hopefully this will actually lead to another commercial partnership that will be valuable to the rest of us who are using their LISs and their EHR systems. And the part 3 is we got to partner with other specialties, biostatistics, healthcare economics. If we're going to drive comparative effectiveness research, they'll be very important. To do the pharmacogenomics piece, you got to dialogue with your pharmacology pharmacy units. And cancer isn't the only area. That's why my first grant foray in this is going to be non-cancer, because I need to understand that environment, being largely a cancer-focused researcher and clinician. And then leverage this infrastructure to build out critical things, honest brokering data, the integration of tissue banks, becoming professional data warehousers are all career opportunities for many of us in pathology, but also very valuable infrastructure that will enable us. And that's why I really think this computational pathology fellowship is key. We now have many divisions of pathology informatics and people that are doing this. I really think every system should think to focus to hire somebody, and if you don't know what the phenotype for this is have somebody do a fellowship in informatics and a fellowship in molecular diagnostics. The 5 people at Pittsburgh that have done this, Jill Hagencord, CMO at Complete Genomics, although BGI Genomics just bought them and she's off to a new venture. Federico Monzon is at the Baylor Molecular Diagnostics Lab and has innovated already in developing some tests for unknown primaries. Ramagulapalli just went to the University of New Mexico as Director of Molecular Diagnostics. They're asking him to stand up a division of biomedical informatics at University of New Mexico with one of our former WashU colleagues, Richard Larson. Peter Kang, who did molecular diagnostics under Jeff, went out to Stanford, got bit by the informatics bug, did a master's in biomedical informatics with Atul Bute, one of the leaders in bioinformatics in the field, just got hired by Council Genomics to lead up their molecular diagnostics effort. And Alexis Carter, who speaks for herself, is obviously driving things. That's a pretty impressive group of people that have essentially taken the 2 areas, molecular and informatics, and I think those are going to be some of the people that will help enable these things to practice. So if you want the roadmap, we'll certainly partner with you on the informatics side. We've had virtual fellows, so if you got somebody doing molecular diagnostics at your institution and you want to infuse them with informatics training, we'll be willing to partner with you to do that. So pathology informatics is critical to the development of personalized medicine strategies. I think we need to influence the leadership to grow future trainees in this space. And since I'm running out, the ideal world has all of these great tools sitting in the middle of these 2 environments. Let's make it happen, and thank you for your time. I will take 1 or 2 quick questions.
Ned Wagner, Evanston, Northwestern Healthcare, North Shore University Health System, Evanston. First of all, I'm not a pathologist, and thank you for letting me come to your meeting. It's been very educational for me and informative. I think that what I hear is the need for better information management and expression and cooperation in the pathology community for delivering the product to clinical end users, information at the point of care for betterment of patient outcome. I would encourage everyone to remain cognizant of the fact that medicine is now a team sports, and that theme has come through loud and clear. The pathologists represent the number I've seen, 18,000 members of the physician community. There are 450,000 other members of the community who are also participants. So I think what we need to keep in focus is communication. I am an unavowed or unabashed advocate of EMRs, only I think that EMRs also need to improve. They are all beginning in their development right now, even though some of them are fairly mature. They have yet to take full advantage of optimizing the physician cockpit that Dr. Chang alluded to yesterday. Just as there needs to be a physician cockpit for presentation of information for decision support in pathology, it needs to exist better in the EMR world. I would have an interesting discussion with you, I think, about the predicted early and imminent demise of the EMR world. That is the physician cockpit, and it is one of the elements of that functionality that you left out in your alliteration of its functions is communication. It's a communication platform, a common communication platform that properly deployed and configured, physicians, hospitals, laboratories, and patients, importantly, can communicate in a common language and platform. So we can have some interesting discussions about that, but thank you for your enlightening presentations.
So since North Shore is where my wife and I first had our first professional jobs, or volunteer jobs, and we fell in love in Evanston, our Northwestern grads. Thank you and Karen for both being here. But I have to tell you, you need, if you really are that firm of a believer about the EHR, go ask them what they think about extracting lab data from the EHR.
Let's take that down the road. EHR is not a slicer dicer. It is a transactional front end that allows us to capture as I say, when properly configured, discrete information that is either actionable or can be fed to a data warehouse where proper analysis takes place.
So you are doing a data warehouse
We
strategy?
are absolutely doing a data warehouse, and I don't think there is an EMR around that is an appropriate slice or dice or data cruncher. It is a very effective front-end transactional tool that supports communication and information at the point of care.
So does your LIS feed data to your clinicians, or does it just slave it to your EHR?
It doesn't. The physician cockpit is the EHR. The pathway for information to the clinician, inpatient, outpatient, community, is the EHR. We subordinate all of our ancillary services to that communication pathway, but that's the final common pathway. It's what nobody wants. No, in the telephone world and the internet world, nobody wants the last mile, and the last mile for us is the EHR. That is where patients and physicians go for the communication touch point.
Okay.
Thanks.
You use that wonderful word, harmonization. And as someone who's a standards junkie, I would greatly appreciate if there were a way of harmonizing our terms. In most cases, I don't care what you call it. Long as somebody else has called it something, I can blame them. And therefore, in this field, originality is terrible. So if you have started something on harmonization, I hope you make it available and let us know where it is, and that they expand upon it, because it could be very useful.
And it's a very boring strategy. It's focused on creating structured data in as many places as we can force it upon clinicians. Unfortunately, docs are very irascible, will not structure things because they think it takes longer and is a worthless exercise. So one stage is just looking at those opportunities where the key data that needs to be used for decision making is structured. That's a heavy lifting effort. So common data elements based on vocabulary structures that exist. In cancer, we're going to use NACER, the National Association for Central Cancer Registries. It's an XMLized format of structured data that pathologists, oncologists, surgeons, registrars, epidemiologists, and researchers all agree on, and it's updated every 6 months. It's one of the most neglected standards in all medicine, so our cancer strategy will use NACER.
You just made my trip worthwhile.
All right, this next guy